very important to us that it's a Manx brand that conveys positive things about the Isle of Man.
Welcome to Island Influencers, where we share stories of successful business owners, experienced professionals, entrepreneurs and community leaders based or with influence in the Isle of Man. This podcast is brought to you by Thornton Chartered Financial Planners, because great financial planning has the power to change your life. Now here's your host, Chartered Financial Planner Sharon Sutton.
This week I have a gin wag with Island influencers Paul and Tiffany Kerruish, owners of the Fynoderee Distillery in Ramsey. The idea of starting up a Manx gin distillery had been with Paul and Tiffany Kerruish for several years. As enthusiastic and knowledgeable gin drinkers, they'd become increasingly frustrated that there was no small batch gin producer on the island, when the botanical landscape and the biosphere is so well suited to producing an original and high quality product. When they met Gerard, who worked for a successful small batch distiller in England, their pipe dream became a reality. A spirits brand with a genuine Manx roots and heritage was born. They're committed to using Manx grown or locally foraged botanicals, collaborating with local businesses and the community wherever they can. In this episode, entrepreneurs Paul and Tiffany share their life and brand stories, highlighting valuable lessons learnt along the way and their vision for the future. They open up about the, at times, terrifying impact of COVID and lockdowns on their rapidly growing business. They explain how Fynoderee pivoted immediately into producing World Health Organization approved hand sanitizer, Finitizer, for charities, businesses and organisations, and the island's essential services. Here's this week's conversation with Paul and Tiffany Kerruish in episode 62 of Island Influencers. Thank you so much for coming on to the Island Influencers podcast, Paul and Tiffany Kerruish of Fynoderee Gin. Thank you so much. And I know how tired you are. You've just come off the back of the food festival, so thanks. Thank you for talking to me this morning. If we'd like to kick right off, why don't you tell me all about yourselves and how we get to being in this fine distillery today in Ramsey in the sunny north. It's absolutely streaming through the windows. You know, how did it come to pass today? I mean, let's hear all about your story, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, the story started probably around 4 years ago now, from when we started making gin at the back of our house in suburban Ramsey, which was a funny thing to do. We had, for several years before that, started to really enjoy craft gin. And we were receiving bottles through the post regularly. We had accumulated an alarming quantity of gins from all around the world and all around the UK. And we were enjoying these and talking about them, really loving the fact that these gins portrayed something about where they came from in particular. And right. We started to notice that there was a really good opportunity to do something for the Isle of Man and to put the Isle of Man on the map when it came to gin. And it started off really as more of a kind of, why doesn't somebody do it? What an amazing opportunity it would be. And in our minds, on a Friday night when we'd be enjoying our gin, we would talk about this potential company, this sort of concept of a Manx gin featuring Manx botanicals, and we had a name in our head, and it was all sort of pipe dreamy stuff that we thought somebody should do. And it went from why doesn't somebody do it to let's actually have a go and do it ourselves.
Oh, that's great. So where did you actually grow up? Where did you come from?
Just myself.
Your backstory, really.
Sure, okay, backstory. Well, I've been on the Isle of Man since I was 13, going on 14, and moved here when my parents decided to move to the Isle of Man. My mum has Manx blood. Her mother was Manx, and we used to come here on holidays as kids.
Did you?
And,
where did you stay?
All over the place, really, different places, visiting family that were here at the time. And when my parents decided to retire, well, my dad retired from teaching, it was an opportunity for a family move, and they'd always loved the island, and so we moved here, and it was a really interesting, sort of extremely exciting time for us as kids. We were delighted to move here,
I bet.
because we'd had such a nice time on holiday. So for us, it was a holiday place, and coming to live somewhere where you go on holiday.
It's everyone's dream, isn't it?
So moved here. I went to Ballacameen High School and stayed there until I went off to university, off to Oxford Brookes. At that stage, to to study food science and nutrition and French.
Gosh.
And then had a change of course halfway through that and did a hospitality management and carried on with French and took a marketing route through that degree.
Yeah, wonderful.
Which then set me off on a marketing career after that.
Yeah, fantastic. And before we started, you told me that you got you helped at the start of the International Business School.
Yes, I was living away actually when that job came up. I was down in Bath working for the University of Bath in a marketing position down there. And I just reached a point in my life where I was missing the Isle of Man and I wanted to come home again. And that job came up and so I applied and unfortunately got it. So that's what then brought me back to the island, having left for a few years. So,
fantastic. Yeah. And how about you, Paul?
I'm born and bred Manxman, so as Manx as the hills, as they
yes,
say
I know.
here in the Isle of Man.
I remember it at school, even if you don't remember me.
That's right. I know. I never remember anybody at school for some reason. It's a blank. So I was born and bred in the north on a farm. So a farmer's son. Went away, qualified as a barrister first down in London, and then at the time decided I'd come back to the island. At the time, it was just a horrendous debt you get into if you carried on training in the UK. So I thought, no, I don't really fancy that. And the island was going through its sort of financial services boom.
Yeah, well,
so it seemed a good move. And yes, it was fantastic. So it was a great start. And so I sort of saw everything from the sort of the good times and the bad times. You saw this sort of waving of the sort of loads of money era to then the sort of pretty miserable 90s when everybody went into negative equity. And I thought, oh, great. Just as I qualify and start my career, the whole sort of, you've sort of missed that wave. So, but as everything, it's cyclical. So sort of carried on. And obviously the island then went on to another sort of surge from a business point of view. And yeah, I really enjoyed my legal career, did everything from litigation to sort of international anti-fraud and money laundering litigation. But I preferred the commercial side. So I preferred the sort of deal side of it, watching clients doing their deals and helping with those. So I sort of moved more over to that side of things and a lot of property and then private client. So away from litigation to sort of putting the deals together rather than trying to pull them apart.
Yeah.
But I've done that now. Well, I'd done that for probably in the early 20s of years. By the time this sort of concept started niggling, and I guess it's that maybe it's something that a lot of people get, that itch. Oh, I've done this for 20, 23 years.
Sure, and you got your own law practice.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And like everything, you go through the good times and the bad times in any profession. And I just got that itch to think I'd love to do something else. So nothing against the law, but I've always had this desire. I didn't want to retire as a lawyer. That was just my personal goal. But when we talk about it, to say, I always wanted to make something. So I class myself as a frustrated creative because I loved art and creative things when I was at school, but I always got sort of drove towards, no, that's not going to be a career, do something else.
Yeah, I'd love to say I remembered that about you, but I don't.
No, so I did a lot of that in my own time, but I ended up, just relentlessly pursuing the legal side because I did that from 16. I always said I'm going to be a lawyer. Watched LA Law. I don't even remember that. Harvey. And I think it was Harvey. It was on LA Law.
Suits, isn't it?
No, Harvey's on Suits, but there was it is a different name. I do love Suits as well.
Oh, I love Suits.
Ernie, his name was, on LA Law.
Right.
And he was this fantastic lawyer out in LA. And that sort of bizarrely, it's not quite the same as LA and the Isle of Man. But that started me in my legal career, was
London,
watching
New
Ernie
York
on LA Law.
Yeah.
So yeah, I always I love this idea of owning a business that made something.
Yeah.
But then when we talk about Tiffany, what are you going to make in the Isle of Man that really is going to make a career that would attract you out of the law? So we sort of kept thinking, well, it's a nice pipe dream, but maybe in retirement.
I want to know how you met.
It was at one of your law things, wasn't it?
It was after a Law Society boozy AGM.
Yes. One of my best friends who I met actually the very first day on the Isle of Man starting school at Ballacameen, Elizabeth Rattigan, who still lives in Douglas and is also now a lawyer. We're very good friends, and she invited me to one of her law things, which is where I met you. Yeah. So getting on for
and our
about
anniversary is coming up in 5 days' time.
Oh, is it? Well remembered. Congratulations.
I know. See, I always remember these things.
Oh, yeah.
Remember the important things.
That was Outlook this morning.
Oh, well done, Outlook.
Reminders. Be the first one I've remembered in a while. No. So I always had this sort of desire to do something else outside the law. And as I say, we just got a common interest in me and gin. We were originally researching the concept of a really nice sort of country wedding venue. That was one of the original topics.
Yeah, that was one of the precursors to starting Fynoderee, wasn't it? We were already in the mindset to do something, but for various reasons.
It's the kids that started it, really.
Yeah, it was also, we have a young family, Emily, who is 8, and Theo, who's 6. And
lovely ages.
They're lovely ages now.
Yeah.
But a few years ago, I was at that point where it was a case of, well, what am I going to do? I didn't want to be a stay-at-home mum. I tried it for a bit, but it was sending me a bit doolally, to be fair. And I really wanted to do something, but I didn't also want to go back to a traditional marketing role, commuting all the way to Douglas from Ramsey daily. Oh my word!
Yeah, well, if you're up north.
So, and I also wanted something that would give me flexibility to work around the kids and not be beholden to other people's agendas and goals and things. So I really did want to be in control of our own destiny a bit more. So that was another factor that really played into us sort of having that oomph and urge to create something of our own. And the wedding venue idea sort of fizzled on the vine, didn't it? But for various reasons, it's still a great idea, but we're not doing it, Paul.
No.
But Fynoderee then emerged into its place, and we've not looked back. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. Lovely. Thank you so much for sharing that story. I mean, that's wonderful, and to be culminating in this.
Yeah,
yes.
But I mean, obviously the start of the journey was amazing. So it was a voyage of discovery, and everything was new, and it was at not quite the peak of that gin sort of wave. So we felt we were getting in, didn't we, to that market?
Yeah, we hit it on the Isle of Man just right, I think, because the Isle of Man was beginning to just notice the craft gin revolution and become interested in the fact that there's more than just 2 gins in the world. And once we launched, it was very nerve-wracking because we didn't know whether people here would get behind the concept of a Manx distillery, a gin.
It's hard to know, isn't it?
Would people do it? And we did a lot of pre-work on social media to try and sort of launch the brand on social media, and Facebook, as you're probably aware, is massive on the Isle of Man.
It is, yeah.
So we bled out sort of information on there, and then we got to the day where we went live with our sales. From the word go, we had an online shop. We thought, well, is anyone going to notice? Is anyone going to really part with their money to buy this product? Mm-hmm. And my phone started pinging, and it was Shopify pinging me to let me know that somebody had bought a bottle, and it was like huge excitement. And then it pinged and it pinged and it pinged, and I had to then turn off the notifications because it was just going wild. So
wonderful.
It was just so exciting, and that was just before Christmas, wasn't it?
Christmas 17.
2017.
Right. Okay.
So
yes, and particularly the designs that you have on the bottles, they stand out beautifully. Not before you buy what's in the bottle, you need to be attracted to the bottle. There's lots of choice, isn't there?
That's a huge part of making a successful spirits brand. The liquid inside the bottle has got to stand up to scrutiny. There is so much competition out there in our world that it has to be good if you want anyone to buy something twice. But the standout design is incredibly important, and we were so lucky to work with Julia Ashby-Smith, who lives in Ramsey, who's a childhood friend of Paul's.
Went to school, remember her at school.
You all went to school. Julia is absolutely specialist in this type of artwork that we wanted to convey on our bottle to bring the story of Kitty Kerruish and the Fynoderee to life.
You're probably better telling the tale of the Fynoderee and how we came to that, because originally we talked around ideas.
Kitty's no relation to you now.
Well, who knows, because it is a Kitty of the North. She was based in Glen Alden. So we had this ideas of different brand names, and I had always had, and it was a bit of a wacky one, but I had this thing of calling it the Hairy Fairy,
which I vetoed immediately.
And I wasn't allowed to call the brand the Hairy Fairy, but I thought it'd be quite unique, and it would play on this story of this mad hairy fairy that I had read about, and I thought it was uniquely Manx, and it would be folklore driven, etc. And then Tiffany was researching that brand, weren't you, Tiffany? The
funny thing was, he mentioned this concept of the hairy fairy, which I didn't like at all, because I thought, well, no one's going to really want to drink anything that's called that. But subliminally, you must have come across the story of Kitty Kerruish and the Fynoderee at some point in your life growing up on the Isle of Man. It's no surprise, because when we were then researching where we might be able to get some Manx juniper from, Google results kept coming up in my feed, and Glenalden kept coming up because the Manx Wildlife Trust had been planting juniper bushes up there to re-establish it because it died out in the 40s, 50s due to farming practices and sheep grazing up there and basically eating all the juniper bushes because they like a juniper bush, the sheep. And so it had all gone, but they were replanting it. And I was very excited because the idea of using Manx juniper in our product was amazing. We do forage as much as we can for our products. Mm-hmm. Juniper is the primary ingredient in all gins, so this would have been wonderful. But when we then looked into it, there was nowhere near ever going to be enough. And also, these bushes take about 10 years to produce a meaningful berry. They're very, very slow to establish themselves and get going. Yeah. However, up there, because this was set up at Glenalden and Google does clever things and sort of marries things together, up in Google kept coming up the story of Kitty Kerruish and the Fynoderee. And so it piqued my interest as now being a Kerruish, and I thought, well, who is this Kitty and who is this Fynoderee? And the story is actually one of the most charming of the Manx folklore stories. You know, there's many of them, but this one I think is probably a bit of a favourite. And it's a long-winded story, and we can go into that if you want to. But the end result is that this character evolves from it, and he is the Fynoderee, but his alter ego is the hairy fairy. And I couldn't believe that this had come right round to Paul's original concept of his idea. So it was fate then. It then became the name of the distillery, just because, well, it tied into the juniper, it tied into our name, and it tied into Paul's original mad idea.
Well, for the benefit of our listeners, the story's on your website, isn't it? So that's where I read it.
Yes.
But I was wondering, what's the moral of the story? What do you think it is?
It's a typical dark,
miserable story,
quite miserable tale where everybody. I remember our first launch event. People were crying when Tiffany.
I read the story out in stages, and they had a cocktail between chapters, and so by the time we got to the end,
they had 4 large cocktails.
Yeah, Mother's Ruin,
and then and then dying cast members of the story. And so basically, he was the prince of the fairy kingdom of the Isle of Man, of which the Isle of Man was covered in fairies, and he fell in love with a mortal girl, and there's no crossbreeding allowed in the fairy world, so he was told, you need to stop your dalliances. And then there's an evil princess fairy who fell in love with the Fynoderee, or the prince, and so she kept following him and seeing that he was defying the ruling of the court and going to see Kitty Kerruish, who was the human. And so she then basically goes back, snitches on him to the court at the harvest festival. He gets called up and hauled in front of the king and the court and told that you've broken the rules of the kingdom, and you're going to be cast out from fairy kind and turned into a satyr, which is half man, half goat. And then he was doomed to walk the land of man till the crack of doom as a goat, half man, half goat, as his punishment.
Maybe he could only eat slows.
Maybe he could. So off he goes, and then not finished. Estelle, obviously, then now has not only was jilted, she then has lost her fairy prince because he's now been turned into not a fairy prince. So she then goes back to visit Kitty Kerruish and punish her for her part in this because she felt she got off light. And whilst Kitty is then on the porch, rocking over, looking at Glenalden, fawning over her missing fairy prince, who of course was no longer coming to see her, Estelle, the princess, conjures up a cloud of henbane from the poison of the plants in the valley and poisons Kitty on the porch, who falls asleep and dies.
That's horrible.
So it's all quite typically dark fairy tale. And then the spin-off from that is endless. So Fynoderee then goes and tries to do good for man as his sort of recompense for this terrible thing that happens to Kitty. So because he feels devastated. So there's lots of little sub-stories about him mending the fishing nets for the fishermen at night, mowing the meadows for the farmers and stacking the hay bales. So there's all these little subplots, and that's what set it off on the whole brand concept of using the island's sort of amazing history and tapestry of folklore and fairy tales, and that's what's become our sort of USP. And it's basically selling Isle of Man, and that was our USP into the market, which the feedback from people in the industry means we definitely hit on something.
Backstory is really important part of craft spirits. People are now much more discerning in their purchasing, and they want to understand why a product exists, what does it mean, and what does it mean to the people that make it. And people are much more prepared to dig deep and delve into the story of a spirit and why it's been brought into the market.
Yeah.
And it really does help us. When we go, we haven't recently because of COVID, but when we have been away at trade shows, we end up with people absolutely fascinated with the whole story and the Isle of Man, and there's just so much to talk about, and people are just like, are you making this up? And we're like, no, it's real. This is truly the Isle of Man. This is what it's all about.
Yeah.
So
I've had numerous people say, do you just make up the stories to make it fit the brand? And he said, no, this is all, it's documented fairy tales. Obviously, in the 1800s, isn't it, that various Victorian writers started documenting the Manx tales. But it does help us stand out because what we've now, as we get more and more knowledge of the industry, there's lots of what they call white labelling and contract gins and other drinks for that matter, where basically somebody just comes up with an idea, goes to a big distillery and says, can you make me this? And all it's doing is just taking somebody else's product, sticking it in a bottle, coming up with a label and then selling it. It works for some people and it is a part of the industry, and
it wouldn't be of
nothing
interest
of
to
no
us.
interest to us whatsoever. No. And so for us it had to be sort of real and genuine, and I think that's where we get the engagement locally has been phenomenal. I mean, the Manx support, the Manx public support for us is just still to this day awesome. We've just done the Food and Drink Festival. We did the agricultural show, the Royal Agricultural Show, the Southern Agricultural Show, and we do tastings. So we do probably on average about 1,500 to 2,000 little mini tastings.
Right, okay.
But we do it as a proper little, like a tiny gin and tonic.
Yeah,
There's a little dash of gin, dash of tonic, garnish, ice.
Oh, that sounds like you can...
And by doing it right like that, it just engages with everybody and just sales. Because you tell them the story as they're tasting it, you fit it to their palate. And now we have a large range that...
There's something for everybody in the range, isn't there?
So you've got sweeter ones, you've got a sort of more classic dry gin style, some are slightly more savoury. So it's, very exciting.
Do you have a favourite?
No, because the thing is, because we have been so involved in the creation of the recipes, each one has been designed to our personal palate, hasn't it? But it is our palate for that moment in time.
Okay.
So the seasonal gins are just exactly what we personally would want to enjoy at that time of year.
So who does the foraging?
So it's a team effort.
Okay.
We've until very recently we've had Kevin Quayle, who is quite well known on the Isle of Man, helping us with our foraging. Unfortunately, his poor leg has prevented him from getting out this season. But we go out as a team. We find that it's just easier to go out and get things done.
We're looking for this.
Yes, we go on a sort of gorse hunt, and brilliant. Don't have to look far for gorse. But
and again, you put that on the social media. People love that, seeing everybody out. There's some great stuff when we do
things like our autumn gin. People are very kind to offer up their apples and crab apples and things, and people bring us.
Should have said I've got a tree full.
We'll have those.
We'll have them. Yeah, thanks, Sharon.
That's really good. So the last 18 months then, I'm seeing you've opened this place, and I know you've been trying to get it open and kept getting put back with certain events like COVID. I mean, how was the last 18 months for you in your new business?
Yeah, I mean, as for everybody, it hasn't done, everybody's been hit hard by it. We came to the end of 2019 and we're actually at a point of actually, do we just stop? Or do we carry on?
We'd reached the pain moment.
Yeah, so we'd reached this, what I call glass ceiling. So we'd gone beyond the craft sort of homemade product, and we had started producing. We got a fantastic engagement, but it got to this zone where we had to expand and get bigger equipment, and then it meant a move to new premises, and then more employees. So that's a big call to make from when we'd done a very organic growth at that point. A lot of people locally say quite an explosive organic growth. So our growth spurt has been, highly, it's been like, sort of out of control train. But it's meant we've accelerated to certain stages a lot quicker perhaps than elsewhere because there's this huge local support. But we got to a point where we had to then scale, and we just didn't know. That's a scary point, as you're back to another precipice basically. Mm-hmm. So when we started it was standing at the edge of a cliff going, do we actually do this or not? And it was fate and combination of meeting a distiller who wanted to come on board and do it that we made the step. Now we had to make that step again to scale, and that was obviously that's a much bigger decision because we're talking much bigger equipment. It's very expensive, in fact, the equipment. So and there's more.
I've seen
equipment.
It looks very impressive out the back there.
Absolutely. So all that out there. So we a couple of local people came on board as investors, and because and that really was the turning point to say, let's go for it. And it was a big debate, and we'd fluctuate. each weekend, no, this is just, we're getting too scary now. Let's just concentrate on the normal day-to-day jobs. But in the end, no, it's so creative. It's so exciting as an industry. And we've got so far, we just can't let this go. So we made that plunge in January of 2020. Now, what we didn't know
just
what was
written
coming.
an amazing strategic plan, and
then yeah. So we've done our big revised business plan with the investors. We'd raised with ourselves a little more capital's come in. We started ordering the equipment, and what we then done was we were pushing hard to get bigger distribution. So we were at head office of a distributor in London called Notary & Co, which is one of the sort of biggest craft distributors in the UK. And we were down in London in February 2020, and
everyone was talking on the news about this
the
new
news
thing.
As we're going from hotel to hotel. We were visiting distilleries and going on the tours. And we thought, make the most of that trip. And you were then watching the news in the evening at the hotel and going, oh, that's getting a bit scary. And we were at that point of we were agreeing terms for bigger distribution into the UK. And then we came back to the island, and literally within 2 weeks, that was the end of that. And the pandemic broke and lockdown started happening. So it was because we came back from that meeting and were sat actually in the Mitre in Ramsey, having our meeting. We would revert, just tweaking our business plan from production point of view, following our meeting in London. And it went so well. And as we were sat in that meeting, again, we could hear the phone ping, ping, and then other people's phones in the room were pinging, and it was basically the precursor to the first lockdown, wasn't it?
Yeah. Ireland's closing its borders, get home.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it was So we went back and literally, that was the business plan for that year, sort of ripped up. So then we sat down with our investors, said, what do we do now? Do we progress with that expansion, or do we just put everything in mothballs? Because you could see what was going to happen. Hospitality was going to shut. So it was quite easy to read what the market was going to do. Yeah. So we decided, no, actually, we've got this investment in. It's not to sit in a bank account. It's to go into kit. It's going to be temporary, although it did seem a bit like the end of the world, and it probably maybe has to some extent. You always come out of these things. So we decided to carry on. Yeah. What we didn't foresee, obviously, is just that devastating impact of lockdowns, and you couldn't have contractors in, the supply chain collapsing. We then quickly pivoted into sanitizer, which was Tiffany's spot. She was watching US, because it obviously broke in the States earlier than the UK, and some craft distilleries out there were using their, in inverted commas, waste alcohol. A lot of people say there's no such thing, but there is some waste alcohol from your process. Yeah. And we're using that to make emergency sanitizer because the whole system was drying up, basically, because the whole world wanted sanitizer.
They did, yeah.
So we pivoted into that, and not expecting to then, within the 3 months, all we were doing was making sanitizer for the island, which we called Fynoderee. And never miss an opportunity to brand it.
Never.
But it went from being what we felt was a nice gesture to help to then, within weeks, actually, could you deliver 1,000 litres to the hospital by Friday? And this has been a Wednesday, and we suddenly became quite terrifying that we were supplying all emergency services, all critical services.
Gosh.
So
that must have been massively difficult to fulfil with plastic bottles.
Well, that was one of the hardest parts, was getting all the constituent parts of what makes the sanitizer to the island, and the containers was the hugest problem of all, wasn't it? And fortunately, Isle of Man Creameries came to the rescue with
Well, it started off, we had Penty Christian at Ellerslie Farms. Yeah. He had a load of 5-litre tubs, which is what we wanted to mix it, because we were literally hand-shaking it to mix the solution. And he had some that he used for his Manx rapeseed oil.
Good workout.
So we had a pallet of those, because you couldn't get them from distributors in the UK, because everybody by that point realised
trying to do the same thing, weren't they?
And then somebody gave me a tip to speak to Finlay MacLeod at the creamery. Fantastic, just immediately, not a problem. We've got loads of 5 litres because we're not giving milk to the coffee shops. And of course they had the 5-litre tubs for coffee shops. All the coffee shops were shut. So a little bit of fate falling in place each time that meant we were driving around, and it was amazing. There was
hydrogen peroxide from a couple of local hairdressers as well.
That's right. So initially it was hydrogen peroxide you have to put in the solution to make a World Health Organization recipe, which is what distilleries were allowed to do. But then you realise all of the hairdressers have it in cream. well, you can't put that in the liquid. So then, luckily, a local supplier of the hairdressers in the Isle of Man, Nordic Hair Supplies, I think, fantastic guy there, came forward and said, I can get you that. And he had a contact in the UK, and he pulled strings and got then, we only needed it quite diluted, and they would mix it for us and dilute it, because it's quite dangerous chemical to deal with at high strength. And it's just this lovely community effort, basically, of people helping out. And once we had those little channels working, we went into full swing.
Oh, that's a great story.
Yeah,
it was actually great for us to have something to do, because you feel so helpless in those situations, don't you? And, to have that as a goal and a challenge to overcome and to try and create was, it made time fly for us during that period.
All I remember is working.
You didn't take a break, did you, for days?
And I think we made, in 3 months, about 12,500 litres.
Because we had not only the fabrication of it, but then also delivering it all around the island. So we were out. I quite enjoyed the drive, to be honest. It
wasn't escape from lockdown. So
it wasn't escape.
I'll go.
Yeah, it was like volunteering to drive to Port Erin to do a finitizer delivery.
Brilliant. Do you want to move on to talking about the opening of this place finally?
During, obviously, Isle of Man had that fantastic virus-free status from, I think it was June, wasn't it, 2020. So we were able to sort of get back onto the project, got contractors back in, and again, we were just so thankful various people were able to come and help us. And I think we'd engendered so much goodwill with the sanitizer, it probably helped a little bit to sort of twist a few arms to get them to put us in their pipeline. And we focused on the distillery at the back first, and we managed to get that pretty much fitted out, wiring, huge amounts of wiring and plumbing to do. And then as we came towards Christmas, we opened a pop-up Christmas bar and shop.
Yes, I remember that,
because we couldn't get the front section where we wanted to do that done in that time frame. We just couldn't do it. So, and that was fantastic. And again, loads of local support, and it was just, that was a lifesaver.
Income really for us, wasn't it?
Kept us going, because we were able to get a real good income boost from that. And then, so that took us through to Christmas. Then you get into the fairly scary January, February, March of our industry. Of course, everybody's taking their dry January, and
things went a bit downhill on the COVID front at that point as well.
And obviously, January again, we were sat in another meeting having what we're going to do for 2021, and it kept ping phones, and away we go, another lockdown in the island. And obviously we then experiencing what everybody in the UK perhaps had experienced all the previous year.
Indeed.
And I think it's highlighted to us how lucky we were for that period. But we had to get back to some normality, and I think it was inevitable, and in a way maybe happening in that quiet time for hospitality. If it's going to happen any time, that was a time for it to be locked down, I guess. And this year has been a sort of obviously a much slower progression back to normality.
We got here open around July, wasn't it?
It was the 1st of July we opened the front section. And this was a real heartache, because we had to self-manage the whole project.
It's hard to imagine, but about 6 months ago there was still a car there where those barrels were, big inspection chamber, oil. It was just...
I remember the mechanic who used to operate from here.
Yeah.
That's right. So it's been everything from, it was originally a Victorian...
Yes, there was a garage door.
I think it was a Victorian bus station. So they used to come in on the boats on the pier, the iron pier, or the tram, and then from here they would take...
Terminus for little tours around the north of the island.
Really? I didn't know.
Yeah, so they used to have apparently Victorian coaches that would take them out to the Point of Ayr to visit, or...
Blue Point.
Was it Blue Point they used to go to? So various little points in the north. So it's had that sort of tourist background. Mm-hmm. And it's nice now that, again, it's already showing, isn't it, becoming a hub.
We're so lucky to have the MER stopping just opposite our door, so when the trams are running, they're not running on a Monday, but normally by now we've had several trams through, and people are just able to come in and browse the shop. So of course that's a big part of the heritage transport network.
Yeah.
And end-of-line Ramsey.
Taxi.
It's just fantastic, And
cheap taxi.
I think the railway like it because it's a reason to come north from Laxey.
Indeed.
Traditionally, they said a lot of people would go Douglas to Laxey up to the Snaefell. But you just needed to add some more attractions in Ramsey, and now, so I think we'd definitely add that because we're right at the end of the line.
Definitely. I was on a tram 2 weeks ago, Friday, 6:00 from Douglas to Ramsey with my friend Elizabeth, and the tram was full of people all coming up here, which was wonderful. There's a really nice atmosphere.
That's great. That's really super.
A nice little twist. And then I think now that embeds us in the town.
Yeah.
I was born and bred in the north, so I went to Ramsey Grammar. So Ramsey's my hometown, and it's just nice to feel like we're adding a reason to bring more people north, because even though we're a small island, it really is that north-south divide, isn't it? So it's nice to...
Well, I've got as far as Glenvine, so yeah, probably.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
And there's more restaurants now in Ramsey. It's really, I think it's really on its...
It is, yeah. We had a
on and up.
staycation up at Milltown, and it was just around the time you were opening. We didn't get here, but there's lots of nice restaurants in town too.
That's right. So hopefully it's Ramsey's time now.
Yeah, all you need is a
Sunny
marina.
Ramsey.
There you go.
Oh, don't go there.
Okay, I won't. Thank you for sharing all that story. It's been an astonishing story, really, from start to finish, and full congratulations for where you've got to. It's really good. So, I mean, moving on to the other questions I normally ask, but I mean, if you don't mind me asking, and I primarily ask this in my role as a day job as a financial planner, but how was money for you growing up? What was money like?
I was born and bred on a farm.
Yes.
So, it's not a subsistence farming, but it's a hard life. And I think I realised fairly early on, no, I don't think that's for me. So I was watching Ernie on LA Law. I'm going, I'm not going to get that. I'm not going to have that lifestyle from a farm. So hence I sort of focused outside the farm. But that's actually a trait of my family, apparently. Every other generation is a farmer, and every other generation, ironically, is a politician. So I'm not going into politics, but that's apparently for about 6 or 7 generations. It's been farmer, politician. So my grandfather was a politician, and I think he encouraged me to look at alternatives outside of...
Charlie?
No, he was called Eddie Kerruish.
Oh, okay.
So he was best friends with Charlie.
Right.
So there's lots of Kerruishes in the north. And he was obviously a big fan of me becoming a lawyer, so he was very supportive of that. And thankfully, he was around when I qualified. It was a real proud moment for him. So so I sort of went down that, and obviously very fortunate. The law is a very good profession, and I've been very thankful for that. And then you get into starting up a alcohol business and realise it all disappears because it is a business that just eats capital and turnover, because it's a fast-moving consumer good, as you call it, and it really is. And so now dealing with that sort of business is a very different one, because
upfront costs and then everybody else wanting credit.
Yeah, all your customers want credit, but all your suppliers want payment on the nose. So it's managing a business. I've managed, obviously, financial services type business, lawyers, CSPs, that type of business. It is all service and hourly rate driven. This is not, it's product. So it's product, it's stock ordering. And now we're getting to that stage of a size where it's quite intimidating orders we're having to put in. And the pandemic has just accentuated that in massive degree, because...
Things like having to order so much earlier than you would naturally do so, because of the supply chain that we know is going to be a problem. We know we're not going to be able to get things in a timely manner. So having to upfront cost huge pallets of bottles to come here before ideally we would have them, but if we don't order them now, then we might not get them. It's that kind of decision we're having to make.
But when you were growing up, or your family, like on a farm, for example, I guess it would have given you some values around how scarce it is, perhaps.
Yes, no, I think so. And it was, I guess when I was growing up, probably didn't pay much attention to it, because I had a really nice, fabulous upbringing. So I never really had to sort of worry about that. And I'm very thankful for that. And then in the career, that was a different one, because, I was very successful, and I had a very, very nice time. So I enjoyed that. This is slightly different. And this is a lesson, I guess, for people setting up new business, is don't underestimate that cash flow requirement, that capital requirement. And it's definitely, and it never stops, because you just go to the next stage and it all re-gears and all comes back. The same pressures from startup. How am I going to, what equipment do we buy? Just gets bigger. And you just need more capital. So we're going through that phase at the moment where it's fast growth means you always feel to some extent the treadmill is never stopping, and you daren't stop, because you just end up spat out the back of the treadmill. It's a very good analogy, isn't it? It's the treadmill.
It is, actually.
And it gets faster and faster the better you are and the faster you run. The downside is, how do you stop, or how do you get off? That's the magical one, isn't it? When do you fit enough to jump and land delicately?
Yes, a succession strategy.
Exactly.
Yes, indeed. What about you, Tiffany?
My sort of family life growing up in Suffolk was very very comfortable, really. My parents are both teachers, both retired now, and I was always the lucky kid that got to be in their parents' class. So yes, I had a couple of years of that, and then I was very lucky to go to a school where my mum was teaching, right in the countryside, a tiny little prep school, tiny, it only had 90 pupils across all years.
Wow.
And so it was idyllic, and so we'd drive out there every day, and coming to the Isle of Man then and going to a large school like Ballacameen was the culture shock rather than the other way round. So yeah, it was a lovely upbringing. We lived stone's throw from the beach, so I've always lived by the sea my entire life, and couldn't imagine not really. Need to be, yeah.
It actually reminds me, we must do a picture of, we found some old milk bottles that my father used to have when they ran dairy.
Oh yeah, I remember.
I don't remember the dairy farm side of it myself, but it was when I think it's before I was born. But we have these bottles, don't we, with EW and Kerruish on them, and we must put them two together because we thought it's quite a nice circle of life, isn't it? That he was filling bottles, obviously with milk, slightly. Not so much duty to government on that one. And now we're filling it full of gin and vodka and
Not
hopefully whiskey and rum. So.
Okay. Well, so all the things you've done throughout your life so far, what would be the most, from a personal perspective, what would be the most fulfilling thing that you've done? I mean, aside from meeting each other and falling in love and having two lovely children, of course.
I'd say this, really. I mean, it has definitely been a dream come true to create our own business and to so far make a success of it. You know, it's a challenge every day, but it is very rewarding. And even this weekend, it's so nice when people approach us and without any provocation sort of say, "Oh, well done, you know, we love Fynoderee, we love sending it away," and people are receiving it, and so it feels good and worth the heartache at times. So yeah.
Yeah, I'd say, because when we set out, it was about, we had that debate. What's the goal? Why are we doing this? Or what are we going to try and do with it as a business? And the first thing we said was a brand. We just thought the key is you've got to create a brand that people will engage with and then build everything around that brand. And to not make it too personal, but then also make it personal as a business. And I think that's what I'm proudest about. We've managed, and we get some amazing feedback.
And to keep it very Manx, you know, it's very important to us that it's a Manx brand that conveys positive things about the Isle of Man. So whether we're talking about our folklore or our biosphere status, some of the, you know, we're proud to now have the premises here, and we really want to be showcasing local musicians and artists. So that's
it'd be fantastic for sessions in here, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
we've already had a couple.
Already had a
Have
few.
you really?
Yes.
Yeah. Super duper. Yes.
And now that we're at that size, we can start. We try and collaborate with other local businesses. So, like the Kerala Chai Gin, that's collaborating with Kumar Menon, who does the fantastic Thali sort of cuisine, and he has his Chai-licious Chai Masala tea, and that's what sparked. It was Kumar coming forward, and that's been fantastic.
Yes.
Paula's Kitchen with the dried garnish. That was another collaboration with them. She makes beautiful granolas and other products, and we'd seen some she uses dried fruit that she dries herself in that. So we went to that idea, and it's just really enjoyable. We've got lots of ideas in the pipeline to do more of that, and it's using our success then to hopefully share it with others, and because that support local and to collaborate, it's so important. Because that's the strength. If we can show the island has this diversity of other amazing food and drink business, it's so important we all work together and be positive and co-promote, and so we shamelessly do it because it sells Isle of Man, and if we sell Isle of Man, our product
benefits
just
everybody.
goes with it.
It does, absolutely. No,
and
that's
we've got our products. So our biggest achievement today, well, our best, isn't it? I think is the Hong Kong, where we're listed in a supermarket, a super high-end luxury supermarket called City Super in Hong Kong. And actually, I met some people at the show yesterday who were over from Hong Kong visiting, Manx guys living out there. And he said it's just so fantastic walking in and seeing this array of products with the Manx flag on. And
they have the Manx flag now. They put the Union Jack to be so we were like, no, take it down.
But
put up the Manx flag.
Fantastic to deal with. And I met them at a show in 2019, and again, they were just blown away by the folklore, by the depth of it.
It's astonishing. It's great.
Yeah.
That's just incredible. So, what do you do to relax? What do you do to keep your life in balance with this full-on?
Do you get any of that? We don't have a lot of relaxation time.
No,
I mean,
fortunately, that weekend.
Yeah. Fortunately, we do quite enjoy being here, don't we? So that it's sort of part of our lifestyle.
It's not for everyone working with their spouse, is it?
No.
I
think, again, that's the issue. We're at that stage, aren't we, where I don't think we could proudly sit here and say we have a great work-life balance, do we, at the moment?
Not good sometimes.
But it's an immersive business that we're so wrapped up in.
And it's addictive and it's hard to put down, and so that's a challenge for us, over the next 12 months.
Yeah,
to try and
two youngsters as well.
Yeah, we've got, the whole point of this was to be in control of having children in our own lifestyle and our own timetable. So, sometimes we have to rein it back, and we're learning to say no sometimes to opportunities which come our way, and you don't have to always say yes. So, that's coming on a bit, isn't it? We're getting better.
Yeah.
But, relaxation, when we do get chance.
Well, your music, isn't it?
Well, I've recently taken up music again. I was a very musical child and played the piano, oboe, a few other things. But then I went through sort of bleak few decades where I just didn't pick up any instruments at all. And then a couple of years ago, I started getting interested through looking into Manx culture and learning more about the Isle of Man. I started getting into traditional music, and I've recently been learning whistles, and
fantastic.
I hope to progress to the flute soon if I can
Celtic
get it.
flute.
Irish flute,
wooden flute.
Yes, wooden flute.
Yeah, I have one.
Yes.
Yeah. So tell me what you think are the best things about living on the Isle of Man.
I think, a perfect example is this. We don't have the best balance at the moment because the business and of the pandemic, everything is just culminated in making it. We've had to focus on that at the moment. But the fact is, when you do go home, you're not even 5 minutes from here is our home.
Yeah.
And when you're home, you're then 5 minutes from beautiful countryside. You're 5 minutes from a gorgeous beach.
Yeah.
You're at maybe 10 minutes drive from fabulous mountainside. And I think that's what enables you to, like now, we've got this fast-paced, fairly intensive, crazy period. But when you do switch off, you can just switch off because the island enables you to do it. You're not commuting an hour home or 2 hours. You're literally home in minutes. We chose to live in the north so that we could do that. That was our lifestyle choice, was we're not going to work in Douglas. I moved my law practice to the north.
Yeah, we get asked, why did you set up Fynoderee in Ramsey? And it's why would we set it up somewhere far from where we live?
Yeah.
It's where we are. The children are happy at school here.
Commercially,
everything's in one spot. So.
Commercially, it would have probably made more sense to go further south, where the population is. But we just said no. First of all, we always wanted the brand to look outward to the Isle of Man. We felt export was a big key part of the business. So that doesn't matter where you are because we're on the Isle of Man. But then it was that choice of our families are both live in the north, and we wanted that few minutes from school and a few minutes from home. And yet, and Ramsey has, no question about it, the north has all the sun. Yeah. So it's one of the sunniest places in the British Isles is in Northern Plains.
I actually really try to avoid leaving Ramsey if I can possibly help it.
That's right. So we're encouraging as many new businesses in Ramsey to open as possible so that we even less reason to... So they're quite parochial stick merchants. But that does enable you, I think, to, even though we're in an intense period with the business, you can very quickly turn off because the island enables you to be so close to all these fabulous ways of just decompressing on a beach or going for a walk in a glen or through the plantations.
We bought a camper van last year, didn't we?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I think it's easier to still be in quite an intense business and still decompress quite quickly because the environment is naturally quite relaxing, isn't it?
Well, we haven't left the Isle of Man, have we, since the start of the whole thing? And to be honest, don't really
massively missed it.
Yeah. Been
looking forward to some trips off, but we've had nice weather, haven't we? We've had two good summers really, through the whole experience.
I think we do have normally good summers. It's just we're too busy going away to enjoy them.
That's right, and I think people have, as a result, probably realised, wow, there is a lot of stuff over here to enjoy because you've had to go and find it and explore it. So in a weird way, there is a positive spin, isn't there, on the experience?
There is.
I think for places like the island that otherwise people are busy work, jump on a flight, go away for the weekend.
Yeah, staycations.
Actually,
who else would have done it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and we find the staycationing, people coming north, is definitely helping the new business here, isn't it, with our sort of distillery
Yeah,
shop
I'm sure.
and bar, and that's only good for the island, I think, not just.
Okay, what sort of challenges, what would be the main challenges you'd say the Isle of Man faces? This is an opportunity to put your negative head on.
Well, we have got challenges, I think. Obviously, the island's going through an inevitable change. It was always going to happen, wasn't it, in terms of its positioning as an international business centre, because that's changing all over the world. So the focus of that is ebbing and flowing in different sectors, isn't it? You've got growth sectors. I think obviously the e-gaming is fantastic. I think going into the cannabinoid farms, that's really fascinating. I think that was a great decision, and that's quick. Again, pivoting decision making. I thought that was going to disappear into the long grass.
No.
But I'm very impressed, actually.
Yeah, it's interesting to read some of the. This is being recorded before the election, obviously, but some of the candidates in their manifesto have made sort of more positive more positive implications than others about their development there.
Yeah, and I think it shows that there is a dynamism to the island when it wants to be, and that was an example, I think, of it making the right call, nimble, and changed. I really thought that was also going to go in the long grass, but it didn't. They drove it forward, and I think it's a great thing. It's just business at the end of the day. It's a product. It's not. So I think that was a great thing, and that diversifies us in a totally abstract way that probably nobody thought of 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think so. I would keep adding on these diversifications. I hope to think we're going to be one of those as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
there's a few other small craft distilleries as well on the island, and that market is global.
Yeah, it's a whole niche of tourism that we could really bring into the Isle of Man. Distillery tourism, you only have to look at the numbers that go through the Scottish Islands.
Oh, for sure.
On distillery junkets.
It's phenomenal, the numbers of visitors going through business centres.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And they tend to be people that are prepared to pay for a premium experience. Indeed. And go out for nice meals and buy nice quality things in nice quality shops. So I think that's the type of tourism that the Isle of Man should be aiming to attract, and we do hope that we will contribute big time to that.
Phenomenal feedback from the tour operators, the interest they're getting in what we're doing here and setting up our tour offering. We keep delaying because we know that's going to get this wave of interest.
Coach trip.
But you've got to
we've had several already.
So we do a lot of bespoke tours at the moment, but there is a huge demand for regular time slot.
Oh, absolutely.
Tours.
Yeah, Bushmills make loads of money out of that.
Absolutely. That's before,
and we've got the whiskey story to start as well, which will bring in a whole new...
Well, that actually moves directly on to my next question, which is what have you got planned next?
Yeah, so it's obviously gin has been our core product line to date.
And a bit of vodka.
And a bit of vodka, our Bumby vodka, which is really popular actually with vodka drinkers that try it. We always felt, we knew we were hitting the gin wave in the UK. It was certainly well into the wave. Not at the peak. We didn't think it had peaked, but we felt it was well in. And that's why we decided to go really high quality, premium, don't mess around. If we're going to do it, go in at the right level. And I think we pitched that in right. So we got on the wave at the right point. But ultimately, all of these crazes, as they call them, will have an element of an ebbing for a period. The thing with gin is, it's the drink of choice, isn't it? Mm-hmm. If you're going to have a drink before dinner or a drink when you get home, I'm struggling to see a replacement for it, really. They say rum is the next thing, but rum, fascinating category. We've made our first batch of rum using a raw sugarcane panela sugar. So we're brewing it, fermenting it, and making it here in Ramsey, and that's turned out fabulously well. But right. I just don't see that replacing the gin for us as a market. It's just a product line that will hopefully enable us to get into different distributors who are really interested in that. But the one that we always knew we wanted to move on to in due course was whiskey, a proper grain-to-bottle Manx whiskey.
Moving on from the one that was in Silby, what was that called?
Yes.
That's Callard. So they make Manx spirit, and they still make it.
They used to call it whiskey, though, didn't they?
They did. They had to change the name because they weren't actually creating the spirit here on the island. So they were importing Scotch. And then they were redistilling it, and if you go on their website, there's quite a lot of information about why they did that. But they were unfortunately not allowed to then call it whiskey because the Scottish Whisky Association have very strict regulations about that.
So we decided ours has got to be grain to bottle is what they call it in the sort of industry. So we wanted to start off making using Manx malt barley, and then actually distilling it here, aging it in the barrels here, and then that can be our Manx malt whiskey. So, but to do that you need much bigger scale equipment than we were on doing gin. So we did some trials, and we have one barrel which will become whiskey in December this year.
Okay, I'll be back.
So that's been in there for nearly 3 years and a day, which is a requirement for it to go from new make spirit to whiskey. It tastes amazing, and we knew, wow, that's definitely got to go down this route. But you need to have much, much bigger equipment, because the way you make it, the actual product you get out of your large wash at the beginning is quite frighteningly small. So we decided to delay that, didn't we? And we focus on our gins and build up to that once we got to the right scale. We're now at that scale with 2,000 litre stills to do that commercially. So we grew our first malt barley crop this year, Penty Christian, down on Not Russian Farm on the Scarlet Peninsula, beautiful limestone peninsula. Grew a special variety of pure distilling grain called Laureate, and we harvested that in about 3 weeks ago. And he's got 50 tons of this beautiful Manx malt distilling barley, which has been tested by a malting works in the UK. We have to get it malted off the island because of the process. That's a super, specialist process. And it'll be floor malted at Warminster Maltings just outside Bath. We will get that back as our malt to make our Manx whiskey.
Right. Okay.
So that is really exciting. It's a whole other kettle of fish. Yeah. It's a whole other sector. It's a whole other manufacture sort of production process. But it's so evocative. The smell of it, when we were distilling that trial in the distillery, the smell was out of this world. It was like nuts and porridge. Oh, it's just the most amazing smell.
Yeah.
So once we get these stills going with that malt barley, they're malting it in November. So we want to get some runs through before the end of the year so we can get our 2021 barrels down. We just got 16 beautiful bourbon barrels arrived last week. So we've racked out our first barrel room.
Yeah, are you going to change to any other types of casks? Or
we'll start off with bourbon. That's your traditional starter fill.
Yeah.
And then what they call finishing casks is what you hear when people use
sherry and stuff.
Sherry and Madeira and Muscatel, Masala. There's almost limitless number of barrels you can now finish.
Okay.
But that tends to be in your sort of last 12 or 6 months. So at the moment we're going for just a really, really established way of making fine quality malt whiskey.
And how many times are you going to distill it? Just once, twice? Bourbon's once, isn't it?
Yeah, so the thing with our whiskey, well, it'll get twice distilled in our process. But again, we're still experimenting with that, whether we'll do Irish method tends to be three times distilled. Yeah. But the great thing is we just have this open book to trial what we want, because ours will be Manx whiskey. So it will be a unique, I can say it'll be a new category, but it will be a new category of whiskey. That's just so exciting.
So we can get some to grow some up north and on a peat bog.
Where we're talking to a Smale Farm, a fantastic couple out of the Martins, and that they'd grow some heritage grain. And so we thought we got this barley grown down in this lovely limestone peninsula, different ground in the south. Yeah. But I definitely wanted to see a crop in the north and the sort of sandy north, much more sun as well, because it does statistically get more sunshine. So all of that experimentation we can do, and because we're an island, we've got that traceability, which is a massive part of the whiskey trending now that's happening, is this idea that you can actually say that bottle came from the malt from that field, and you can actually give them a field number, and we've got the soil samples from that field and all that sort of element to it. Like you're getting into the really deep, geeky whiskey market, but it's there.
That's the whiskey market.
Absolutely, and that's the beauty of it, and it's limitless because it's a global market. And what we're fortunate about is, unlike a lot of often local food and drink that's perishable, you have that awful nightmare of how do you ship perishable items that need refrigeration or freezing. The great thing about alcohol with our gins, and then the same will be with the whiskey, it can travel at room temperature, doesn't deteriorate, and so it makes it a very portable
apart from the angel's share
item. Well, that's right. The angel will get her share from our barrels.
There'll be a few angels above here, I think.
That's right. So
okay, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Just moving on to the final part, we'll just ask you a few fun questions, really. I mean, any books that you've recently read that you would want to recommend to people as a source of inspiration, even for your business?
at the moment, all I get time to read is books about whiskey, funnily enough.
Okay.
So, yes, I'm reading all sorts of books about the whiskey industry.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And 6 and 8 year olds they read by themselves now, do they?
Well, yes, there's a bit of child reading going on
Bedtime
as well.
stories?
Bedtime stories, yeah. A few of
Emily
those.
is just the most fabulous
she's a
reader.
voracious reader, yeah.
Yeah.
She's got
She
a
has,
pile
like-
of half-read books by her bed, isn't she? She's so funny.
Theo at 6, boy, slightly less interested, far rather running around doing his death slams on the floor. And,
Yeah.
he likes reading,
Typical
but you have
little
to coach him through it. Emily just is like a bookworm, isn't she?
Yeah.
She is the...
Yeah. What about Dad?
Now, you see, I have a very simple sort of reading appetite, which is zombie and sort of post-apocalyptic novels. And
You like
there's-
escapism, don't
and
you?
I've read probably just about everyone that's out there. So my Kindle is... So we've always had this thing of putting the kids to bed. Our little boy always loves to just sort of... And it's in my bonding time with him, I guess, because I do work crazy hours. But then my time with him is we'd sit and we'd read a little bit, and then while he'll go to sleep, I would read a Kindle. So I just read these crazy sort of apocalyptic novels, which ironically... Of course, I've read every run-up to the pandemic going, because it is quite scary when you read these, what seem crazy stories. But of course, they've been researched by the authors on how would something like a zombie apocalypse happen. It's just the same principle. It's just we're not eating people at the moment, thankfully. So for all of the sort of the methods of whether it was a conspiracy to be spread as a, as a terrorist incident, and how it would spread via the hospitality and coffee shops, it's just quite scary when you read back at it. But that's my escapism. It's just total escapist fantasy read.
Come back to the real world, it's much better.
Yeah, and that's the way I decompress from it. Because when you read those, you're not in the real world, and your brain just focuses on those stories. So that's how I really have always enjoyed that.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Can't say I'm going to run out and buy any of those anyway.
No,
Paul, but,
I have to be a little bit careful if Theo's reading over my shoulder. But,
and who's, well, exactly, I was thinking. So what's your favourite quote?
I do have a favourite quote, which is, and I had to read it because I never remember the precise wording of it, but it is...
And I'm glad you're not choosing the Manx crab one.
No, I'm not allowed to talk about
banned
the
from
bucket
that.
of crabs.
That needs to come down.
If you look at bucket of crabs on Wikipedia, there's an amazing definition. But anyway. So Winston Churchill said, all men make mistakes, but only the wise men learn from their mistakes. And I hear that, every now and again it comes up, you hear it on TV and and I just think it sums up what is business, basically.
Yeah.
So I think doing this, wasn't it? It's one of the most, it is a wise comment, and it is a sort of very Churchill comment, isn't it? Which is, don't be afraid of making mistakes. And if you do, don't sort of fret and macerate, you just keep going back over it. Because the reality is you'll learn from that.
Yeah.
And the key thing is don't ideally make the same mistake twice.
Yeah.
And I think in business, especially if you start up, is just don't let that freak you out. If you do something, luckily, touch wood, we feel we've managed to navigate without making too many, because we've made sure research things, do your market research, do your product research, do your production method research. But occasionally you'll do something and go, oof, that didn't work out. Yeah. And just flag it down, don't do it again. Do it differently next time.
Good one. So, a really inspiring story, actually. And it's been great to hear all about it. So where can people go to learn more about you and the things that you're doing? Or we'll obviously signpost your website in the show notes. Is there anything else? Any other?
I think really, if people locally want to come and meet us and come and see what we're doing, is to get down to Ramsey.
Get on the tram.
Get on the tram, come up and see us. And we're going to be launching our tours programme anytime now. So by the time this podcast goes out, it might be possible to book online.
Well, we'll put a link to that in the show notes as well, if you'd let us have that. That would be
we're
great.
really looking forward to showing everybody around our little world here.
That's it. And then the website obviously has all the product information, and we're gradually populating more of the sort of
there's some lovely stories on there.
Backstory on there, and there's quite a lot on there.
Yeah.
And obviously that's our shop window to the world, so we use that a lot. Instagram,
we're rubbish at Instagram.
Social media is a strange one, isn't it? So Facebook, we've always been, because it is so strong in the Isle of Man, it definitely is stronger here, I think, than Instagram for the island market.
I use it myself personally, so I'm good at Facebook, but Instagram, I'm just probably about 15 years too old.
I'm with you on that.
So I need help.
We're on it, and it gets quite good reactions, but
cool.
we definitely need a younger employee to to take that one on board and run with. And Twitter, I don't really get, but but it's the world we live in, isn't it? It's technology.
It is.
And you have to, again, you can't ignore those channels. We just know we have to get the right people to help us with those ones, because
it's overwhelming, actually. I mean, the way that we're interacting with our customers and suppliers, and it's over so many different platforms now that you get a message from somebody and you think, oh God,
where do I reply?
Was it Messenger? Was it an iMessage? Was it a text? Was it
little red ones coming forward with your phone?
Well, it's literally 5 minutes. Oh, I'll just check my email. It's not that anymore. It's, I just check my email, my Messenger, my Instagram messages, the Facebook, and it just goes on and on and on, isn't it?
Easily lose control. Yeah,
you can.
But that's the modern world we're in.
Well, let's embrace it. Thank you so much. My island influencers this week, Tiffany and Paul Kerruish. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Island Influencers from Thornton Chartered Financial Planners. To find out more and for useful links, visit thorntonfs.com/podcasts.